James Comey compares Donald Trump to a mob boss, calls him untethered to the truth, and describes his presidency as a forest fire. The former FBI director is hitting back at the man who fired him in a new tell-all book. Ellen Morrow is in Washington this morning. Ellen, those pull quotes, as they're known, well, it shows why Comey's book is already a bestseller and it hasn't even been released yet.
That's right, Heather. I mean, hell hath no fury like a former FBI director scorned, because this book, what we've seen of it so far, is really quite scathing about President Trump himself and the Trump White House overall. We're going to show you a lot of the quotes, but the first one we're going to show you is this one here. That's the cover of the book, A Higher Loyalty, Truth, Lies, and Leadership. One of the quotes about what's going on is James Comey writes, "What is happening now is not normal. It is not fake news. It is not okay." And there really is sort of a tale of two books here, because there are the more gossipy details in this book, and then there are the more concerned details about what Comey says is an administration that's concluding itself in an alternative reality. Now, on the more gossipy side, we can show you this quote here where Comey talks about Trump's appearance, saying his face appeared slightly orange with bright white half moons under his eyes, where I assumed he placed small tanning goggles. Comey also talks about the shape of Donald Trump's hands, how big they are, and he talks about the infamous P tape, the allegations that Donald Trump hired prostitutes to urinate on each other during a trip to Moscow before he was president. Comey saying that Trump wanted the FBI to investigate the alleged P tape in case Melania thought it was true. But going back to sort of what he's more concerned about, we have another quote where we can show you Comey writing that his dealings with Trump gave him flashbacks to his earlier career as a prosecutor against the mob, the silent circle of assent, the boss in complete control, the loyalty oaths, the us versus them world view, the lying about all things large and small in service of some code of loyalty that put the organization above morality and above the truth. And that's obviously what James Comey is most concerned about in this book.
It certainly could be seen as trying to settle some scores with the man who fired him, Ellen, but here we are. You know, we're into the Trump presidency now. We passed the one-year mark. How damaging could these revelations be?
Well, James Comey and Donald Trump are both divisive figures. For most people, either you like them or you just don't. So will this book change people's minds? It's really hard to say. Certainly, President Trump supporters will be attacking this book, and they'll probably lynch onto this one quote we can show you here, where Comey writes, "I have one perspective on the behavior I saw, which, while disturbing and violating basic norms of ethical leadership, may fall short of being illegal." Trump supporters will probably point that out, that James Comey is saying what was going on isn't necessarily illegal. But we know Republicans are taking the threat of damage that this book could do quite seriously, Heather. They've already launched a website called Lion James Comey to discredit the former FBI director, just as he's going after the president in this book.
If the former FBI director wasn't already a thorn in Trump's side, headlines like these are likely helping to drive his point home. His revelations come almost a year after Trump fired him as FBI director over the Russia investigation, and they bookend a week that saw Trump's personal lawyer raided by the FBI, reportedly thanks to a tip from Robert Mueller, who was appointed to lead the Russia probe after Comey's firing. Now, here is what's just breaking. Donald Trump hitting back just moments ago on Twitter, making sure that Comey's revelations dominate the news cycle for the next few hours at least. Here we go. Let's go through the first of a two-part post. Trump picks up on the Republican strategy to discredit Comey as a liar, going as far as accusing him of perjuring himself in his testimony to Congress. And here's the second part, along with the personal attack, and that's a new one. Trump makes a bit of a twist here and ends with the tweet saying he's proud of firing Comey. He also appears to be returning to his administration's original line on why Comey was ousted, claiming it was over the Clinton investigation into her emails, even though he later admitted in an interview he personally wanted Comey gone for the Russia probe. So, lots to unpack just within the last few minutes. Thankfully, we have Daniel Lippman, who's with me now from Politico and in Washington. Great to see you, Daniel. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Daniel, this is just your timing. It could not be better because if we can pull up those tweets again to just go over them. James Comey is a proven leaker and liar, and goes on to say how he lied to Congress under oath during that famous testimony in June of last year. And then, as I said in the second part of this, weak and an untruthful slimeball, terrible director of the FBI, one of the worst botched jobs of history. That's the Clinton investigation. It was my great honor to fire James Comey. He had been silent up until now. He's let loose, Daniel, with both barrels.
He has. I think he's not listening to his advisors who tell him to not give fuel to this fire. And, you know, Trump himself has been accused by James Comey of leading a forest fire of his administration. So Comey is going on this huge media tour. I'm seeing him next week in New York at the New Yorker podcast interview with him and David Remnick. But it's really unprecedented for a guy who was the director of the FBI under a president and the president himself to be engaged in this very public war of words.
So let's go into, so that's your initial take on the Trump response. Let's go into some of the things that we've been talking about this morning, that pretty much everyone is talking about this morning. The excerpts released from A Higher Loyalty, Truth, Lies, and Leadership. It is a scathing indictment on a couple of levels, as the Washington Post points out so clearly. Indictment of his leadership and his presidency, but an indictment of his character. I want to bring up this first quote from the book, which really seems to encapsulate Comey's take. This president is unethical and untethered to truth and institutional values. His leadership is transactional, ego-driven, and about personal loyalty. Is this just a settling of accounts because this guy doesn't like the president, or is there more here as we look to his character?
Anyone in Washington who has ever known Jim Comey know he's not one to settle scores. This was a career FBI guy. He was the deputy attorney general under Bush. And so most people think that Jim Comey's character is pretty good compared to Donald Trump, who admits that he likes lying for sport, basically. And I think Comey will find his book to be very, you know, he's selling very well. It's the #1 on Amazon. And I think the interesting part is how most Americans think that Jim Comey is someone who has served his country, and that Trump was only against Comey because he wouldn't swear a loyalty oath to him. So I think that's where history will judge Trump.
So the character really emphasize lack thereof. But when you mention the loyalty point, that takes us to another area of the book that many people are pointing to, and that is his comparison of Trump to a mob boss. So let me read this part here. When he met Trump, the encounter left me shaken, so says the book. I'd never seen anything like it in the Oval Office. As I found myself thrust into the Trump orbit, I once again was having flashbacks to my earlier career as a prosecutor against the mob. The silent circle of assent, the boss in complete control, the loyalty oath, as you were saying, Daniel, the us versus them worldview, the lying about all things large and small in service to some code of loyalty that put the organization above morality and the truth. The president equated with a mob boss, Daniel. I mean, that's harsh.
You can't make it up. Yeah, I think an interesting part of the book is how it talks about how Trump is often stationed behind his Oval Office, the Resolute desk. And that's the main desk in the Oval Office, instead of having a nice, friendly chat on the couches and pretending to be friends. And so that's really Comey equating him to being on his throne. And he says that the president is not the king. He is an elected leader who represents all Americans. And that is a stunning indictment of how Jim Comey thinks about Trump. And you're going to see more presidential memoirs that probably equate Trump to a mob boss, even if it doesn't use those exact words. Trump has been obsessed with loyalty, even though he often throws his staff under the bus every week.
In talking about his leadership style and his character, he talks about the presidency repeatedly as being a forest fire, you know, scorched earth and just, you know, taking down everything as it goes, uncontrollable. Makes that reference repeatedly. it's interesting, obviously. It's very colorful in the way it's told. But what is he putting his finger on as far as the danger for Americans with this president and this presidency?
I think the danger Jim Comey sees is the fact that President Trump seems to ignore the norms of constitutional democracy. You're not supposed to interfere in Department of Justice investigations. And you have never seen presidents use Twitter or other media platforms to basically call for the DOJ to go after someone for crimes that they think they committed. And so if Obama had used Twitter and said, go after this person, even though he's never been charged with anything, Fox News and the right would go ballistic. And that's what Trump just did 40 minutes ago.
So let me ask the other side of this book. There's a lot on the political, and then there's a lot that's teetering into, or not teetering on, it is fully on into the tabloid fare. And that is, of course, all that goes back into the dossier, the Christopher Steele dossier, the allegations of Donald Trump that were never proven, but Donald Trump in Russia, prostitutes involved. This is very much being discussed today because Comey addresses it in detail in the book because Trump asked the FBI to investigate to disprove it. And as we bring up another quote, it bothered him if there was even a 1% chance his wife Melania thought it was true. So this is something that was, anathema to James Comey. You couldn't believe that there even 99% was okay, but that 1%, she had to be reassured. But that whole aspect of the dossier, how do you see it fitting in, Daniel?
Yeah, just like you said, it has never been substantiated. But Christopher Steele is a well-respected former British intelligence agent who is an expert on Russia. And so he clearly has good sources. And I think Robert Mueller is looking at this right now. And I think most Americans, they don't know what to believe about that part of the dossier. But I would say that many other parts of the dossier involving Trump's financials and his relationships with the Russians in terms of them pouring money into buying up Trump Tower apartments and condos, that has been true. And so very little of the dossier has been proved incorrect, although sometimes you have salacious details that may not match reality completely.